Some of the best games I've ever played were the ones nobody was talking about. Not the giant AA releases with million-dollar marketing. I'm talking about those random games you install with low expectations, and then suddenly it's 3 a.m., you're emotionally attached to the characters, and you can't stop thinking about the story for days. So before you spend another $70 on a brand new release, trust me, you need to play these hidden gems first. There are way too many amazing games that got buried under bigger launches, bad marketing, or just terrible timing. And honestly, that sucks, because some of these games deliver experiences that feel more memorable than most modern blockbusters. So, in this video, I'm talking about hidden gems that deserve way more attention. Games that surprise you, pull you into their world, and remind you why gaming feels special in the first place. Sleeping Dogs is one of those games that completely blindsides you. I went in expecting a basic open-world crime game, and within a few hours, I was fully invested in undercover cop drama, brutal street fights, and one of the most alive cities I've ever explored in a game. Hong Kong at night just hits differently. The neon lights, crowded streets, random karaoke moments, food stands, rain pouring while you're speeding through traffic on a motorcycle. It all feels weirdly cozy and dangerous at the same time. And the combat? Man. Every punch feels heavy. You're not just spamming buttons. Every fight feels raw and personal, especially when the environment gets involved. 1 second you're chasing gang members through the streets, the next you're sitting quietly with characters that genuinely start feeling like family. That's what surprised me most about Sleeping Dogs. Beneath all the action and chaos, there's actually a lot of heart in it. By the end, I honestly didn't want the game to end. Prey is the kind of game that makes you question literally everything around you. I still remember the first time I played it. The opening felt normal for maybe 10 minutes, and then suddenly, the game completely flipped my brain upside down. After that, I stopped trusting anything. A coffee mug on the table? Suspicious. Random chair in the corner? Also suspicious. The atmosphere in this game is insane because it constantly makes you feel unsafe without relying on cheap jump scares. You're alone on this massive space station, slowly uncovering what happened while trying to survive creatures that can disguise themselves as everyday objects. And somehow, that simple idea stays terrifying the entire game. But what really makes Prey special is the freedom. The game never forces you into one playstyle. You can sneak around enemies, turn yourself into random objects, hack systems, use crazy alien abilities, or just create your own weird solutions to problems. Half the fun comes from moments where you sit there thinking, wait, can I actually do this? And the game just lets you. It feels smart, immersive, and honestly way ahead of its time. Even years later, I still can't believe more people don't talk about it.
Aliens, which you learn by stabbing a needle into your eye.
Mad Max feels like one of those games that quietly came out, got ignored by a lot of people, and somehow turned into an absolute addiction for anyone who actually gave it a chance. The world is brutal in the best way possible. Endless deserts, destroyed highways, rusted wrecks everywhere, and this constant feeling that survival itself is a full-time job. But the thing that hooked me instantly was the car. Not just driving it, building it. Every upgrade genuinely feels important because your vehicle becomes your lifeline out there. At first, you're barely surviving against random raiders, and a few hours later, you're blasting through sandstorms with a fully armored death machine while explosions are going off around you. It feels incredible. And somehow, even with all the chaos, the game nails those quiet moments too. Sometimes you'll just stop on top of a cliff, look across the wasteland while the wind is howling, and the world feels strangely lonely. The combat is brutal, the vehicle battles are pure chaos, and the atmosphere constantly pulls you deeper into that post-apocalyptic world. This is honestly one of those games where you start playing for just an hour, and suddenly your entire night disappears. Titanfall 2 honestly ruined a lot of shooters for me because almost nothing else feels this smooth. The movement alone is addictive. The second you start wall running, sliding through enemies, and flying across the map without touching the ground, regular FPS games suddenly start feeling slow. But what shocked me most was the campaign. I expected cool action and giant robot fights. I did not expect to get emotionally attached to a massive machine named BT. The relationship between the pilot and Titan feels surprisingly genuine, and by the end, it actually hits hard emotionally. And then there's the level design. There's one mission in particular involving time manipulation that genuinely made me stop for a second and think, how did they even come up with this? Every mission keeps throwing new ideas at you without overstaying its welcome. One minute you're jumping through collapsing factories, the next you're in full-scale Titan warfare with explosions everywhere. It's fast, creative, emotional, and ridiculously fun from start to finish. The craziest part is that even after all these years, Titanfall 2 still feels more fresh and exciting than most modern shooters coming out today. Honestly, this is the kind of stuff I love finding in gaming. Games that didn't get the attention they deserved at launch, but once you finally play them, you realize you missed out on something special. And trust me, we're only getting started.
Pilot, your Titan is standing. Copy that. Stand by for Titanfall.
Kingdom Come. Deliverance feels less like playing a game and more like getting dropped into an actual medieval world and being told, good luck. There are no chosen one powers here. You're not some legendary warrior at the start. You're just a regular guy who barely knows how to fight. And honestly, that's what makes the whole experience so immersive. In the beginning, even one enemy feels dangerous. I remember getting absolutely destroyed in my first few sword fights because the combat demands patience and timing instead of mindless button mashing. But slowly, you improve, you learn. And after hours of struggling, finally winning a tough fight feels insanely rewarding. The world itself is what really pulled me in though. Walking through muddy villages at sunrise, hearing people talk about everyday problems, riding through forests while the soundtrack quietly kicks in. It all feels weirdly real and grounded. Even simple things like eating, sleeping, or preparing before a journey make you feel connected to the world. And then, there are those random moments where a small side quest suddenly turns into a hilarious disaster or an unforgettable story. It's one of the few RPGs where I genuinely felt like I was living inside the world instead of just completing objectives on a map. A Hat in Time instantly reminded me why colorful platformer games used to feel magical. The second I started playing it, I had this stupid grin on my face the entire time. Everything about the game just feels playful and full of personality. The worlds are creative, the music is ridiculously catchy, and every level feels like its own little adventure instead of repeating the same ideas over and over. One moment you're peacefully exploring a movie studio run by arguing birds, and the next you're sneaking through a creepy haunted house that suddenly turns into full horror mode out of nowhere. And somehow, it all works perfectly together. But what really makes the game special is its charm. The characters are goofy in the best way possible, the dialogue feels genuinely funny, and there's this warm, nostalgic feeling the whole time that reminds you why platformers were so fun growing up. It never tries too hard to be serious or cinematic. It just focuses on being fun, and honestly, that feels refreshing now. By the time I finished it, I felt like I'd gone on this weird, happy little journey that I didn't want to leave. The Saboteur feels like the definition of an underrated classic. It throws you into Nazi-occupied Paris, but instead of feeling like another generic war game, it has this unique style and atmosphere that instantly stands out. The coolest part is how the world itself changes depending on what you do. Areas controlled by the Nazis look dark, dull, and almost lifeless, but once you fight back and liberate them, color slowly returns to the city. It sounds simple, but seeing that transformation happen while you're causing chaos across rooftops and blowing up enemy bases feels incredibly satisfying. And honestly, the game just makes you feel cool. Sneaking through enemy territory, climbing buildings while alarms are going off, escaping through narrow streets after planting explosives. It creates so many cinematic moments naturally. But underneath all the action, there's also this personal revenge story driving everything forward, which gives the whole experience more weight than I expected. Paris at night, jazz music playing in the background, lights reflecting off wet streets while you're hiding from soldiers. There's just something about this game's vibe that sticks with you long after you stop playing. It deserved way more attention than it got.
John, I could use a hand. Keep your left up. Yeah, thanks for the tip.
Sunset Overdrive feels like a game that drank 10 energy drinks and decided to turn pure chaos into gameplay. From the first few minutes, it's already throwing explosions, ridiculous weapons, mutant monsters, and non-stop jokes at you, but somehow it never feels overwhelming because the movement is so smooth and fun. The game basically rewards you for never touching the ground. You're constantly grinding on rails, bouncing off cars, sprinting across walls, and flying through the city while everything around you is exploding. And once the movement finally clicks, it becomes weirdly hard to put down. But what I loved most is that the game never takes itself seriously. It knows it's ridiculous, and it fully embraces that energy the entire time. The weapons are insane in the best way possible, too. 1 second you're launching vinyl records at enemies, and the next you're summoning giant exploding teddy bears like it's completely normal. Even failing missions somehow stays entertaining, because the game's personality is constantly carrying the experience. Under all the craziness, though, there's this rare feeling of freedom where you stop worrying about objectives and just enjoy moving around the city for no reason. It's loud, colorful, chaotic, and honestly one of the most fun open-world games I've ever played. By this point, you can probably already tell these aren't just good games. These are the kind of games that stay in your head for years because of how unique they feel. And somehow, we still haven't talked about some of the craziest hidden gems on this list. Gravity Rush 2 feels like stepping into a dream where the rules of the world just don't exist anymore. The first time I launched myself into the sky and started falling upward through floating cities, my brain genuinely needed a second to process what was happening. Movement in this game feels unlike anything else. You're not just flying around normally. You're shifting gravity itself, drifting through the air while entire cities spin around you, and somehow it creates this weird feeling of freedom that's hard to explain until you actually play it. But what surprised me most was how peaceful and emotional the game can feel between all the action. There are moments where you'll just stop moving for a second, look at the massive world floating around you, and realize how beautiful everything feels. The art style, the music, the atmosphere, it all blends together perfectly. And then there's Kat, the main character, who honestly carries so much charm naturally without trying too hard. She feels human, awkward, kind, and easy to connect with. Even the side missions, which can get goofy sometimes, somehow add personality to the world instead of feeling like filler. Gravity Rush 2 is one of those rare games that constantly makes you feel wonder, like you're experiencing something creative and different that modern games almost never attempt anymore. Enslaved. Odyssey to the West is one of those games that sneaks up on you emotionally when you least expect it. At first, it looks like a simple post-apocalyptic action game, but the more you play it, the more it starts feeling like a journey between two very different people who slowly start relying on each other. You play as Monkey, this strong, rough character who doesn't really trust anyone, and you're stuck traveling with Trip, who basically forces you into helping her survive. That setup alone already creates tension, but what makes it special is how it slowly turns into something deeper without ever feeling forced. The world itself is beautiful in a ruined way. Nature has taken over massive broken cities, and every area feels like it has a story behind it, even if nobody is there to explain it. The combat is simple but satisfying, especially when you're swinging through enemies with that staff while everything around you is falling apart. But honestly, the real highlight is the relationship between Monkey and Trip. They argue, they struggle, they don't fully trust each other at the start, but over time, you start feeling that bond grow naturally just through gameplay and moments you share with them. By the end, it doesn't feel like you just finished a game. It feels like you went through something with them. Binary Domain is one of those games that almost nobody brings up anymore, but once you play it, you wonder why it ever got forgotten in the first place. At first glance, it feels like a classic squad-based shooter, but the moment you get into combat, you realize there's something different going on. The enemies aren't just robots you shoot until they fall over. They break apart in layers. Armor chips off, limbs get damaged, and you start seeing the mechanical structure underneath while the fight is still going on. It makes every encounter feel more intense than it should be. You're not just shooting enemies, you're dismantling them piece by piece in real time. But what really surprised me was the squad system. Your teammates actually react to how you treat them. They remember your decisions, they respond differently depending on your actions, and it makes the whole experience feel more personal than most shooters of that era. Even the story, which starts off pretty straightforward, slowly builds into something more emotional and grounded as you spend more time with the team, and there are moments where everything just clicks. The gunfire, the chaos, your squad shouting orders, and you trying to survive it all while things are exploding around you. It's rough around the edges, but it has so much personality that it ends up sticking with you way longer than expected.
Spot us if we come out there. Sit tight a little longer. Damn, what are you nuts? Damn it, man!
Spec Ops The Line starts off feeling like a pretty standard military shooter. You drop into a ruined Dubai, there's sandstorms, radio chatter, missions to complete, and it all looks like something you've seen before. But the deeper you go, the more the game starts to feel wrong. Not in a gameplay way, but in a way that slowly messes with your head while you're still playing it. The city itself becomes this constant reminder that nothing is really under control. Sand covers everything. Visibility keeps shifting, and every encounter feels more desperate than heroic. You think you're just following orders, just doing the mission, but the game keeps pushing you into situations that make you question every decision you've made so far. The squad you're with also adds to that pressure. Their tone changes, their reactions get more tense, and you can feel things slowly falling apart between them as the story moves forward. And then there are moments in the game that just hit differently. Not because they're loud or explosive, but because they force you to sit with what just happened. Spec Ops doesn't try to make you feel like a hero, it does the opposite. It pulls the rug out from under you and leaves you sitting there with the consequences of everything you thought was normal in a shooter. It's uncomfortable, it's heavy, and it stays with you long after you're done playing. Singularity is one of those games that feels like it quietly got lost in time, even though the ideas in it are honestly insane. At first, it looks like a pretty standard shooter set on a creepy, abandoned Russian island, but very quickly, it turns into something way more interesting once you get your hands on the time manipulation device. That's where the game really wakes up. You're not just shooting enemies anymore, you're literally rewinding objects, aging things into dust, freezing moments in time, and breaking fights in ways that feel almost unfair in the best way. 1 second you're stuck in a firefight, and the next you're rewinding a destroyed bridge back into existence just to cross it. It constantly keeps you experimenting without forcing it. The atmosphere is also surprisingly strong. The island feels like something went horribly wrong, and you slowly uncover what happened while everything around you keeps getting stranger. There's this constant mix of military horror and sci-fi mystery that keeps pulling you forward. And even though it's not a perfect game, it has these moments where the gameplay idea and the environment just click so well that you stop thinking about anything else and just enjoy messing with time itself. It's creative, it's underrated, and it definitely deserved a lot more attention than it got. Vampyr is one of those games that doesn't really rush you, and that's exactly what makes it stick in your head. You play as a doctor in a city falling apart during a deadly epidemic, and almost immediately, you realize something feels off about everything. People are sick, scared, and exhausted, but at the same time, there's this darker layer underneath where you're not just trying to save lives. You're also fighting something inside yourself. The whole game constantly pulls you between being a healer and being a vampire, and that choice actually matters in a way that starts affecting everything around you. What really makes Vampyr special is how personal it feels. Every NPC has a name, a routine, a life. You can talk to them, learn about them, even follow their stories. And then the game quietly puts you in a position where you have to decide if they live or become part of your strength. There's no easy answer, and that's what makes it heavy. The city itself also feels really grounded. Dark streets, fog everywhere, people coughing in the shadows, and this constant feeling that things are slowly falling apart no matter what you do. Combat isn't the main focus, it's more about choice, tension, and consequences. And by the time you start making bigger decisions, you realize this isn't just a vampire story. It's a story about control, guilt, and what you're willing to sacrifice to survive. Evil West is basically what happens when someone says, what if we mix old school cowboy action with vampires and just go completely wild with it? And honestly, it works way better than it should. From the first few minutes, the game doesn't even try to slow down. You're thrown straight into brutal fights, punching monsters across the screen, blasting them with electrified weapons, and chaining combos that feel ridiculously satisfying. It has that arcade-style energy where everything is fast, loud, and constantly pushing you forward. What I really liked is how physical the combat feels. You're not just shooting from a distance. You're up close, grabbing enemies, slamming them into walls, and finishing fights in the most over-the-top ways possible. Every encounter feels like a chaotic action scene from a movie where you're somehow both the hero and the demolition crew at the same time. And even though the story is simple, it fits the vibe perfectly. You're basically this last line of defense against supernatural threats, moving from area to area, while everything around you gets more intense and more dangerous. There's no overthinking here, just pure action energy from start to finish. Evil West doesn't try to be deep or complicated. It just wants you to feel powerful, and honestly, it nails that feeling perfectly. And that's the list. These are the kinds of games most people skipped, ignored, or just never heard about. But once you actually play them, they stick with you way more than you'd expect. If you've played any of these, I want to know which one hit you the hardest. And if there are more hidden gems you think deserve attention, drop them in the comments, because I might just turn them into the next video.